Okay, hello everyone. This is our May 10th open house for the Springwell School. My name is Gloria Chan once again. I am the founder and head of school at Springwell. And we are a small progressive micro school that's located about a mile north of downtown Silver Spring. And I originally founded the school because, well, frankly, for my little ones, I have a 7-year-old named CJ. I have a rising kindergartner, Helena, and my baby Fisher is fresh out of the womb 6 months ago. So as I'm a resident here in the Tacoma Park, Silver Spring area, and as I thought about education for my children, I really wanted an option where we could keep their spark alive. That, I fundamentally believe that, children come with curiosity, they come with creativity, they have this essence about them that is so powerful and strong. And if us grownups can just keep that alive, throughout their lives, then there's nothing left to do except meet their full potential. And how I came to some of this philosophy around educating my children and providing this opportunity for children in our community is very much informed by my professional path. I've spent the second chapter of my professional career. I was working as a professional coach, helping people of all ages, from recent graduates finding their way to young professionals to mid-career transitions, thinking about helping folks getting promoted in their career paths or balancing work-life balance. I've also worked with older individuals trying to find out what their next chapter is, what their retirement would look like. And within all of this work with grownups, I've noticed that so much of my work as a coach was about backtracking, was about undoing, was about unlearning. And I just almost moved to tears here. Because as you all know, in this pandemic has really heightened all of that, all of those challenges. Any challenge that a human has ever faced, it has just been heightened during this pandemic. So I'm just thinking about, when I think about what kind of education I want for the children, I want to think about how can we do this in a way that they don't have to unlearn. So it came down to really three core nuggets that I want to share today. The first one is just giving yourself permission to be, giving yourself a really strong sense of who you are, what you care about, your values, your gifts, just having a really strong sense of self. And I found that, a lot of grownups, we just weren't taught to make that space for ourselves, whether it was in school or in our families. That's still a skill set that we as humanity is still developing. So that's one very beginning thing. How can we create a generation that's not all about people pleasing and box checking and kind of squeezing ourselves into these really weird shapes that kind of don't fit who we are. So that's number one, is how can we just be ourselves? The second is, how can we be so safe in being ourselves that we allow other people to be themselves too? How can we have really great communication? How can we have really great emotional intelligence? How can we have really great persuasive skills so that we can actually be in community and figure out what it's like to be in community together? And part of that kind of community impact is also, now that I know myself, what do I want my impact to be on others in the world? What do I want my sense of purpose to be? So that's actually a really big part of Springwell education is knowing ourselves well enough to vocalize it and express ourselves, and giving ourselves the creativity, the space for creativity and creation, and following lines of questioning, following our curiosity, and just being really alive, being really multi-sensorially alive and loving it. I think that's something as a mom that I struggle with, and as a professional, like balancing all these things, like how can I really ground myself in my own senses so that I love being alive? And that's like a daily struggle. And then the third bucket that I want to say is like, you know, how does the student develop their relationship with the physical environment? How do we stay organized? How do we keep a clean house, keep a clean cubby? How do we preserve the materials around us? How are we connected with nature? How do we connected with the structures and the buildings around us? How do we feel comfortable, like literally being here, embodied on earth, in our communities? How do we do that? And so those are, I would say, like three really big general buckets that we care about at Springwell. And because of that, we only have 3 school rules. We have care for self, care for others, and care for the environment. And everything is attached to those 3 concepts. So with that kind of starting off point, let me share some slides with you. Share screen. And welcome to those who are just joining us. Play. Okay, that's our lovely building. Again, we're just a mile from downtown Silver Spring. And I'm trying to mute. Did that work? Okay, sorry about that. And I talked a little bit about our philosophy. We're all about learning for life. The skills that we teach on campus need to make sense. Like there has to be a reason why we're teaching it. Everything on campus is super intentional. And I talked a little bit about this already, how traditional education, it's like, I get why we got here. We have to be able to know that students are progressing and that everyone is being taken care of, and everyone, you know, like no child is left behind. But at some point, the system kind of broke down, and we need to make space to be human again. So here are our inspirations. We looked at, you know, what are the philosophies, the teaching approaches that really put the child at the center of their community. And we found kind of post-war Europe inspirations to hit the mark. This Reggio Emilia, Montessori, and Waldorf approaches really create the space for the students to be themselves, to explore, to inquire, to have the respect of their own independent time to work. And this concept of, you know, multi-sensory, mind, body, heart, all parts of the child having space in the classroom is really important for us. We take a whole child approach. That constructivism is incredibly important for us. And what that means is that how the child perceives the world creates the child's identity in that moment. How the child sees, how the child thinks, what the child believes is integral. Our teaching is going to be developmentally appropriate. We meet them where they are, their age band, their skill level. And finally, you know, with those post-war Europe inspirations, we want to build this Springwell foundation that is inclusive and global from the very beginning. So finding belonging together and this global and community mindset are going to be really important. I want to talk a little bit about diversity. As you saw in our pillars, both inclusion and global perspectives are critical to who we are. And I think because of the diversity of the founding team and of the staff and how we message, the families that are drawn to us are also incredibly diverse. So racially and ethnically speaking, 50% of our population is quote unquote diverse. Our sliding scale tuition also lends itself to socioeconomic diversity. Say 50% of our student body are on the sliding scale, and about a quarter pay less than half tuition. So that's also a really important part of our ethos. We are an open and affirming campus, and that's really important for us to say out loud for a lot of our families. And finally, when I was, there's this saying that comes to mind when I was interviewing for our incoming upper elementary teacher. I was doing some searching, and she has this tagline, and it was draw a bigger circle. And I just found that so aligned with who we are in terms of inclusion and diversity, is that we're constantly drawing a bigger circle. We might not always get it right all the time. We're constantly learning, always expanding, always taking new perspectives. So that's something that kind of grounds who we are in terms of inclusion. And our faculty and staff is just as diverse as our student body. And we're really excited to have new staff joining on board as we expand next year. So academics at Springwell, you heard all about what grounds our practice, knowledge of self and others in our environment. We are a mixed level, mixed age learning environment. So there's one classroom with kindergarten and first grade. The second band is grades 2 to grades 4. And then lastly, it's our new middle school classroom starting from grade 5 to grade 8. And here's a quote from Mr. Noah. He says, "In years and decades to come, my students may not remember all of the content of our lessons, and that doesn't bother me. What I hope most for my students is for them to learn habits. And habits are things that stick for life. If I can support my students to develop great habits, I have done my job." And here are some habits when I visit Mr. Noah's classroom and when I visit the classrooms at Springwell. These are some of the habits that I see being developed every single day. The sense of creativity and believing in oneself, worthy enough to create. The sense of leadership, being a great leader and a great follower, because there's a time for both. Developing resilience. I see that in students every single day when they're tackling something hard and the teachers are just giving them the space, giving them the encouragement to slowly, maybe sometimes burst quickly through those difficulties and build resilience. There's going to be great communication. The students are constantly negotiating community norms, discussing mutuality and fairness and justice in the classroom. And of course, connection, collaboration, and very importantly, self-care. That all said, with kind of our core values, floating throughout the whole school and being woven throughout the whole school, academics and assessments is still really important to us because we want to make sure that we're meeting every child where they're at, and they're progressing at our core subjects. I mean, math and reading are so critical to how our systems are tracking progress, and they're so critical because they're that important. They are how we communicate with one another. They're how we understand the world around us. So for us, assessing in math and reading is just as important, but the context and the why for us is because we are in community, we're in self-expression. So we use Eureka Math for scope and sequence for math. We use Wilson Foundations for language. Sean will talk about the Wilson interventions in a little bit. Well, we have ongoing teacher observations and feedback. We have 3 sessions, fall, winter, and spring session, and there's reporting after each session. We have gallery walks once a session as well, where students present their projects, get feedback from one another. It's wonderful. And in the fall and the spring, our students lead their parent conferences. So they share themselves from their perspective, what they've been learning. And in our approach, we activate the whole student. It's student driven. We care about their interest. It's arts integrated. So how they perceive really matters. And this love of beauty and respect for beauty is important, as well as hands-on and outdoor education. On the right-hand side of this, you'll see our upper elementary team building exercises. So they do that once a week. And in this one, they were creating a ropes course off of our beloved tree and trying to climb through it. So you'll see a lot of outdoor learning like that. And our math and reading is everywhere. So they'll measure progress. They'll measure how tall plants grow. They'll create fractions with these hands-on materials. They'll listen for beats in music and they'll count. So whenever we teach in math and reading, they'll have their foundational core skills, and then we apply it all around us. And here's a sample of project-based learning at Springwell. We have a strong classroom economy project going. They've learned history, learned about early economies around the world. They do their critical thinking. They go, what can I sell to my classmates? What do they want? What is the demand? What is the desire? And they design their shops accordingly. Their writing, they describe their materials. They have their writing reflections, marketing materials. Everything is arts integrated where they're creating their wares. There's, of course, math. I had one student pulled aside for math as she was trying to figure out all of the transactions in the classroom economy and figuring out how much money she owed to her classmates. So it's truly building some resilience there. And socio-emotional learning. How do we relate to one another in the economy? Who feels left out when no one buys my stuff? There's a lot to process. And I want to showcase some of our student-led lessons. There's Sean's daughter doing a slime lesson on the left. And one of our older students has become obsessed with origami, learning from different YouTube tutorials, and he was giving a lesson to the kindergartners and first graders there. And of course, enrichment. This session has included gardening, drumming, a STEAM program to build like movable machines. And we'll also have a Spanish and arts program that will be starting up soon. Okay, with that, I want to introduce Sean McDonald. Sean is a Springwell parent currently and will be leading our enhanced literacy program for next year. So Sean, I will pass it to you.
Okay, you can go on to the next slide. I have been working on letting my secret out, but when I was a little person, I had great high hopes for kindergarten. When I started kindergarten, I knew all my letters. I even knew a few words, and I hit kindergarten and I was really smart. And in Los Angeles, they changed the school year right after I started kindergarten, started early entry actually. They changed the school year. So instead of starting in February and September, you could only start in September, and all of us February admits had to either go ahead or behind. In the 60s, they did that based on IQ, and they offered that I could move into first grade. So I had about 4 months maybe of kindergarten and then bounced into first grade and had just turned 5 when I started first grade. And we were a modern school district. We were pioneers of the whole language approach to reading. No more phonics. We were just going to look at books and learn how to read. And that did not work for me. And I remember very, very clearly the end, second semester of 3rd grade. It was a rainy day. I think it was in February. Rainy days in Los Angeles were not common, and this was a cold, dreary one. And I had pushed it to the end that I had to write a book report on a chapter book. And I could not read chapter books. They did not have pictures to help me read. And I had this book, B is for Betsy. And I sat in a chair in the living room all Saturday and I figured out how to read. And I told myself, I figured out how to read. Or I thought I did. I took that book out of the library in the last couple of weeks getting ready for this and looked at it and I went, no, I've never read this story. Because what I learned how to do was scan each page for enough words to come up with a meaning of my own and basically rewrite the story. And then I wrote my book report on the story that I rewrote in my own mind based on the few words that I gleaned out of the pages. And that's pretty much how I read when I was in elementary school. It didn't work for close reading. For close reading, I was a very slow reader. And I carried that with me. The last time I had a reading assessment was after I finished my first bachelor's degree. And so I was like 21 and took the Miller Analogies test. And there was concern about whether I should do graduate school, even though I was summa cum laude, because I was at the 30th percentile. And I probably am still at the 30th percentile, but I know how to cope. So I've been looking at and studying about reading really throughout my career, but it's really only as my daughter came along, you can change to the next slide, that I started really coming out and digging in further, because this is Ruthie in kindergarten, as we did kindergarten in the sunroom. Ruthie started kindergarten, and her goal that she wrote her first week of kindergarten was to learn to read and learn my numbers. And she started kindergarten knowing her sounds and letters and having a little trouble with blending words. And, you know, the beginning of kindergarten in almost every school is going over those letters again. So nothing really happened the first part of kindergarten. And then we hit COVID, right when reading was supposed to take off. And instead, we're sitting at the sunroom table. In this case, she's doing her handwriting and looking at the iPad. Kindergarten, end of kindergarten, as for everybody else, spring of 2020 was a waste. First grade was going to be better. And really, the school tried harder that we were at for first grade, but she did not learn by virtual. And I worked hard. I got all sorts of different reading helps and curriculum to help her through. We didn't get anywhere. And so went searching for answers. And with Ruthie, I was really surprised actually when she said she didn't want to keep going to the school she was at. And I looked around and I said, well, what about this school? And described to her Springwell as it was in its first year. It's changed a little bit. And she responded saying, I want to go to Springwell, because at Springwell, I can take my time with reading and I can zoom ahead in math. And that is exactly what she's been doing. So she has been taking her time with reading, but she is no longer at a kindergarten level. As a matter of fact, part of what I'm doing with Springwell is working to get her the intensive reading she needs now that as a second grader at the end, she's getting to be a beginning of second grade person on reading level, and knowing that's a hard place to find adequate teaching for. So I've been collaborating with Springwell. On the other hand, she is doing math in the top group with 4th and 5th graders and just zooming ahead in math the way she always wanted to. So one of the things that has emerged and changed at Springwell is really focusing in much more on science of reading over time. In this very fancy graphic, the reading rope from Scarborough, which I lifted from the Reading League, looks at all the different things that go into becoming a skilled reader. And the top in the purple is all the pieces of language comprehension, background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge, which I know in Ruthie's case, she does fine at, because she comes from a family with 2 PhD parents, and we've been reading all along, and she has huge vocabulary. Not every kid has that, but I know that is what we have. And word recognition is that part that we think of more as reading. Phonological awareness, decoding, sight recognition. And that's really where she has struggled, and where we've needed to find much more step-by-step instruction and focus. One of the things that I love about Springwell, as far as having my own kids there is no simplifying and boiling down to the simplest thing in that purple set of things. Kids are, in these multi-age classes, able to push themselves intellectually to their highest level, even if they can't read very well. So last fall, Ruthie was not functionally reading really at all, but she was still doing her genius projects with 4th grade kids and writing reports based on their research together, and being able to really intellectually do things at the level that she needed to. So she didn't have to slow herself down intellectually to meet her reading level. We're working to bring her reading level up to her intellectual level, and that's been a really good mix. And the next slide talks a little bit more about the Wilson pieces. In our regular curriculum, they're using Foundations, which is in the yellow. It's been just KN1 this year, and next year, 2nd and 3rd graders who need it would be using Foundations. And that is a very core-centered phonics program with a really good scope and sequence. It's based on the Orton-Gillingham method, but the scope and sequence in Wilson really gives you like the most bang for your buck of closed syllables. So you learn all of these complexities of closed syllables, and you learn how to do multi-syllable words with closed syllables. So Wisconsin is actually a really easy word to read if you know a closed syllable. Manhattan is an easy word to read if you know a closed syllable. And that gives kids incredible confidence when they can do all this. My kindergartner is so happy that she is reading compound words. She thinks she is just the bee's knees because she knows how to read compound words. For kindergarten and 1st graders, they are still close enough to where if they're struggling with reading, they just need a little bit extra help along the same scope and sequence as other kindergarten and 1st graders. We're not specifically using the Just Words curriculum in our school. However, Mr. Noah is trained in that, and he is going to be the middle school teacher next year. So he brings in a lot of pieces from that into his teaching and giving kids a lot of skills. The part that I'm going to be using in the enhanced literacy program is the Wilson reading system. And this is a very focused, intense intervention for kids who are struggling with reading. It's designed for 2nd through 12th graders. It really is not for kids younger than 2nd grade, because what we do in the Wilson reading system is we teach them the English language down to the tiniest nuts and bolts. And they learn it piece by piece by piece. And we make sure they get mastery as they move along. And so it uses a lot more of their intellectual abilities to really understand English and learn how to read by what they understand. So I just did a reading assessment with my daughter after having done about 5 months in Wilson reading system. She's still just testing almost at 2nd grade level, but the skills she's learning through Wilson reading system, she's actually up to 4th grade level on some of those skills. So that means she's going to sometime just zoom ahead with all of those skills. So basically what we're doing in this program is allowing kids to be in tiny groups, to work as they need to, and master piece by piece until they can get all that reading together. And then a little bit about how we're doing the enhanced reading program at Springwell is on the next slide. So enhanced literacy program, it's for grades 2 to 8 because we only go up to 8th grade next year. And for students who just haven't been able to attain literacy reading, either due to poor pandemic teaching or a learning disability, we'll be doing review of assessments, and we can do additional assessments. My other job is I'm a psychologist, so I can actually pull out what we need to figure out what's going on with kids. How long does it take? The Wilson reading system, they say it takes 2 to 3 years for most people to complete the whole 12 steps of the program. Students with severe dyslexia may take a little bit longer than that to get there. And what we'll be doing is 3 hours of instruction a week. The exact schedule is going to be figured out based on how all the different pieces come together. But it will be in the morning because that's when I'm fresh and when it's easier for me to be at school. Reading skills are always taught to mastery in this program. So we don't leave holes. The kids are not like Swiss cheese in their reading. And it's going to be integrated with the rest of the program through good communication with the classroom teachers and through having classroom teachers who have background in this so that they're speaking the same language. And in the younger grades, the on-level class is going to be using the same scope and sequence, just at a different pace. So they're all talking the same way and things really can fit together well. So that's my piece.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sean. I will, before I jump into these COVID protocols, I will share that the enhanced literacy program is an add-on to the general tuition. So here's a snapshot of our enrollment currently. For lower elementary, there's only 5 more slots, even less if you count the applications that are being processed. In upper elementary, there's only 3 more spots. So if you're earnestly considering upper elementary grades 2 to 4, I recommend that you get those applications in sooner rather than later. And in middle school, there are 5 more spots for next year. Sean will be running these enhanced literacy program groups. There's going to be up to 3 small groups. So again, if you're curious specifically about this program, I would go ahead and get those applications in sooner rather than later. For COVID protocols, we've been following CDC, following Maryland guidance. Sometimes we're a little bit more cautious. For example, when they decreased the isolation and quarantine times, we were a little bit more conservative. So next year, starting next year, COVID vaccinations are required with medical or religious exemptions, and all of these lovely protocols, including negative COVID testing after breaks, temperature checks, lots of great hygiene and mask wearing. We have sliding scale tuition. So if you choose to opt in for sliding scale, you'll submit your description of your household's financial picture, and we will determine based on your needs. And there are 3 payment options: one-time payment, 3 payments, or 10 monthly payments. And if you're interested, this is the rolling admissions process. You saw the openings that we have for next year. You'll submit your application, and within 3 weeks' time, you'll be sending in your academic and financial records. You'll have a meeting with me. You'll be meeting with Sean if you're interested in the enhanced literacy. And then after we review all of the documentation, we'll turn around our decision, providing the family with a deadline to respond. So now I can stop the share and take any questions. Anyone have any questions?
I would like to ask about homework. How does the whole homework thing?
Yeah.
Your teacher right now is vehemently against homework, and I think it's a very interesting paradigm to venture into. It's really, really relieving, but I don't think it's going to last in terms of Tiny Bridge.
So one thing about Springwell, and Sean, you can attest to this if you'd like, or share your thoughts on this, is that we are vehemently not dogmatic about anything. So what I mean by that is we really do meet the needs of the child, of the family. As a general rule, from kindergarten to grade 4-ish, we do not send homework back as a regular practice. However, if the child didn't get to complete all their work in school, and we want to build some habits of consequences of what happens in the real world when you don't finish your work, we might send them, send home some folders to start building those habits of accountability. So accountability, still matters for us. If there's a student who's really struggling with one particular math skill or one particular reading skill, and they need that repetition, the teachers will work hand in hand with the households to send work home as needed based on what they're observing for that child. As the students grow older and have greater capacity for focus at home, attention at home after a whole day of hard work, starting in grade 5 and through middle school, we'll be sending work home as appropriate. It's still going to be Springwell style homework, interesting homework, student-based interests, things that they want to drill in on, or habits that we want to intentionally create for them. We'll be collaborating. One of the things that's so special about Springwell that I've seen, teachers and families and parents and students all coming together and working in collaboration to making sure that child has what they need. I would say that that's something that's so special about being a part of, one, a micro school community, and two, being part of a founding micro school community. So next year, we're only in our 3rd year. So there's nothing rigid that's set in. Like, we haven't been around for decades where we must do something this way. And so that brings a lot of flexibility to how we work with our families.
And I'll just add in a little bit about homework. My daughter's in 2nd grade now, and she only has like one overarching project a term that is more a homeschool collaboration, and then work that she doesn't finish. Now, she takes pride in always getting her work done, so she doesn't bring any home. And so she loves that. I see the note about ongoing communication with parents. We have this app called Blooms. So I'm messaging the teachers on Blooms really regularly, back and forth, asking questions, getting feedback, and getting really on the spot sort of feedback, as well as often just talking face to face when we're doing pickup. So that's definitely, communication is available. And I just sent a note to her teachers today saying, Ruthie did this and she wanted you to know about it. And that's always part of it.
Yes, Brenda.
Yeah. So I heard you say that, so the school was founded 3 years ago, I think you said?
2020.
So, yeah. So at that time, were all of the grades in existence all the way up to 8? And the reason I asked that was, I think the question I was going to ask, not knowing whether you had 8th grade then, was about the success of students who matriculate from Springwell to, I guess, the regular class world of classrooms.
We're
And I
not
was wondering
quite there yet. So in our founding year, we had K-4.
Uh-huh.
This year we tacked on 5th grade.
Mhm.
And then next year is our founding middle school year.
Got it. Okay.
We'll likely hold at 8th grade for a few years. And should there be interest in our family community, we would be adding high school as well. So that's also in kind of very early thinking phases.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I would say, though, that I have spoken with founders of micro schools in other communities outside of Maryland, like similar to ours, similar philosophy and value system, and similar approach to this, like truly emergent, truly constructivist situation. Those founders, and when I say kind of like truly emergent, I mean truly following the students' interest and having them really be a co-creator in their education. Those founders have shared with me that the level of critical thinking skills and 21st century skills is through the roof, like so much more than what they would have had developed if they weren't at that micro school. So I would say, conceptually speaking, I would imagine that our middle schoolers would be, ready to rock by the time they graduate middle school.
And I guess because it's rather late in the year, there's not really an opportunity to watch the classrooms or, in operation or anything like that.
Yeah, so right now, we're slowly starting to move out of pandemic thinking, where we're just keeping everyone off campus. We
Yeah.
don't have scheduled live open houses. However, if you work
Sure.
with us, we'll do it by appointment only. So if you really want to get in there, see the classrooms, we'll make it happen. We would likely require COVID testing beforehand. If you want to just get a sense of the teachers and the students, there are outdoor classroom situations, like for example, Wednesday mornings, the upper elementary classroom, they go outdoors and do team building exercises like every week. So if we plan ahead and you just want to check us out outdoors, we can schedule that and make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My question was a little bit similar, related to the process and engaging. Like I have a kid who'll be a rising 7th grader, and I can't imagine them like not being a part of the application process. So I'm wondering how they fit into that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, this goes to like the co-creating the process with us, because that's how we do things. I would imagine that there could be off the fly them being a part of the interview process, so I could get to see them. I could also imagine an in-person visit for the child, especially like I'm thinking that outdoor day is like easy way for them to
They could probably interview Mr. Noah and Miss Sarah and meet their teachers, because they're a pretty cool set of teachers.
Yeah, I could sense that too. And it's like I said, it's a micro school situation. So if we can easily like kind of formulate ways for them to be involved. Yeah. We'll work on it.
Yeah, great.
Any other questions?
I will say one of the things, Gloria and I have talked about this before, since Springwell's first year was during COVID, Springwell has to actually learn how to function outside of COVID. There's not going back to how we did it before, because that's just how it always has been. So, learning how to open up and invite people in is like a whole new world.
Yeah.
On the other hand, as somebody who needs to be able to go to work and I couldn't afford my kids to be stuck in quarantine for 2 weeks at a time. It has been great that Springwell has not shut down at all for COVID all year long. So that's been awesome.
Thank you, Sean. I always forget that that's a huge achievement. I forget to share that. Well, I will pause the recording, but stay on after in case other folks have questions. But it was lovely to see you all. Thank you, Sean, for being a part of this. Thank you to our families for your interest. And we look forward to your applications.
I'll stay around a bit too.